Indigenous people got full voting rights in this country only in 1960. And ever since, it's been a serious question for many in those communities as to whether to participate in Canadian elections, and if so, how. Here to help us understand the issues, Grand Chief Serge Simon of the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake, Margaret Froh, President of the Métis Nation of Ontario, and Riley Yesno, a member of Eabametoong First Nation, that's north of Thunder Bay in the Ring of Fire, and she's also a student at Victoria College at the University of Toronto, and it's great to welcome all of you here to our studio. You and I have met before, but
yes,
never shaken hands.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
We did it on satellite, and great to see you again, Madam President. Okay, I want to start, Grand Chief, with you. Just off the top, tell us why voting in some Indigenous communities in Canadian elections is considered controversial.
Well, it's controversial because many First Nations still really hold on and assert their sovereignty. The sovereignty of a people isn't to be underestimated. It needs to be asserted and promoted. But you look at it in today's context where the Canadian government is actually taking care of or administering some of your affairs. So that sovereignty is not complete, in my opinion.
Is there a notion that somehow if you vote in a Canadian election, you're undermining your own sovereignty?
Well, I don't think so, because the courts have already said that the relationship between us and the Canadian government is trust-like. Joe Oliver, the finance minister under Harper, once said that the reason why the Transparency Act went through Indigenous affairs instead of the finance was because of resources and trust. So if this is the case, then First Nations, do we have the right to choose our own trustees who's administering our affairs? I think yes. And until we get full access to our resources and control of those resources, then I think there's still an aspect there where for Indigenous people, that's the reason for voting. Otherwise, it would be a purely Canadian exercise.
Have you voted in the past?
No, never.
You have never voted in a Canadian election?
Never.
Will you this time?
I'm leaning towards yes.
Really?
Yes.
Why are you changing your mind?
Well, because after 8 years as Grand Chief, I've seen and heard so many things, legal precedences, and especially under trust law. And for that part, I think I would like to have a say who's administering my resource royalties. Because we don't get a penny from taxes. We get everything from the resource extraction and exploitation of this country. And yet we have very little to say about it. Municipal governments have more say than we do. So, yeah, I'd like to have a say on who's sitting there using my money and using it for infrastructure and other reasons in this country and not giving us a dime. And
will you urge your fellow Indigenous citizens in your part of the province to vote as well?
I think it's up to each individual to look at the reality of the relationship between the Canadian government. If you want the if you don't want to have a say in what's happening with your resource dollars, then don't vote. You know, if you want a greater say, you got to assert it somehow.
And this is how?
Yes.
Gotcha. Madam President.
Yes.
Your view on whether Métis people in this province should vote in the upcoming federal election?
Well, I will be voting, and I hope that our people do vote. And I think just to go back to the opening statement, I think it's important to recognize that not all Indigenous people in this country have been treated the same way, and our realities have been quite different. And so the realities of the Indian Act, which you referenced earlier in the opening comments about the right to vote, are different than they are for Métis. When it comes to how Métis feel about voting and participating, whether it's at the municipal or the provincial or the federal level, I think, at least from my experience, it's quite different than a lot of First Nations in terms of how we see that process.
How so?
Well, I think back to our history, and one of our very most famous leaders, Louis Riel, he was a member of Parliament. And in fact, he has been finally recognized as a father of Confederation. He negotiated Manitoba into Canadian Confederation. So I don't believe that we are, I believe, in my experience, Métis people are far more likely to participate in the democratic system that exists in Canada, and certainly we see that in terms of people that have stepped up to run for office.
Have you always voted?
I have. I have always voted.
And you will vote this time?
I will vote this time.
And you will encourage others to vote as well, other Métis people?
I will absolutely encourage Métis to vote. And I think, just going back to the Grand Chief's comments, it is about having some say. And obviously the federal government is, it has a lot of power in this country. And it's a relationship that I think is a really important one. For us, it's a relationship that is finally being recognized, that direct relationship between the Métis Nation and the Crown and Canada. So it's an important time, I think, for us to get out to the polls and to have our say.
I know Louis Riel is probably the most famous Métis politician in Canadian history. But you actually don't have to go that far afield to find one here in the province of Ontario. Dave Levac, who's the longest-serving speaker of all time and used to represent Brant, in his portrait is carrying a Métis blanket to show his lineage
That's
and
correct.
how proud he is of it. So
Yes, and we have members of parliament. We have more and more representation in the Senate as well.
Okay. This first question for you is going to be a little strange. You ready?
Right, I think so.
How old are you?
I'm 20.
You're 20.
Yeah.
So this will be your first federal election that you've had the opportunity to vote in.
Yes, my first ever election was the last provincial election in Ontario.
Did you vote in that one?
I did, yeah. It was a bit of a decision for me. I went back and forth up until like the very moment I had to cast it, but I did.
And ultimately you did. And are you going back and forth on this federal election?
I've decided that I will be voting in this election, but I also recognize still and honor like the complex feelings that surround the election for me, and I think for a lot of other Indigenous folks that I know.
What's the complexity for you?
And the reason why it was so hard in the last election was because I was just about in this time getting into, a lot of theory about sovereignty and about, our nationhood and things like that. And I could see so clearly this argument that a lot of folks make in our communities about how voting, is in contradiction to how we believe our nations and our government should run. The Two-Row Wampum Belt Treaty says that we should have two parallel systems, that technically, as somebody who doesn't identify as a Canadian, why am I voting in a Canadian election? There are all these things. And also just general mistrust of a government for, I think, very justified and righteous reasons.
Mistrust of this particular government or the government of Canada in general?
Settler colonial government generally.
Got it.
I think about how in the last federal election, the communities that weren't sent ballots or weren't sent enough ballots, and how can I tell these people, go out and vote when you've been given every reason, really not to in the past. So I recognize that, but the reason why I decided to, especially in the last election, was I recognize that at the end of the day, my quality of life personally doesn't change so much, no matter who really gets in, because of the level of privilege that I carry, walking in this space. But a lot of Indigenous folks, especially, are highly marginalized, are highly overrepresented in demographics of inequity, and they face serious violence and repercussions at the hands of regressive government and regressive policies. And so there are different degrees of harm. And as much as I would love not to have to vote in this election, or whatever conflicting feelings that I have, I recognize that the reality is we're living in a settler colonial state, and that there are repercussions to that, and that I want to make sure that I'm thinking of the whole community as opposed to just my vote specifically.
Now, your home is 300 kilometers north of Thunder Bay.
Yeah.
But you're living in Toronto now as a U of T student.
Yes.
So where will you vote?
I'm in Toronto St. Paul riding, so it's Carolyn Bennett's riding. She's the...
That's the riding we're in right now.
Yes.
So that she's the former sitting member.
Yes.
And do I infer from that answer that that's where you're going to put your X on election day?
I don't know. Where are you going to put your X on election day, Steve?
Now, I never tell, Riley. Do you ever tell?
I don't.
You don't tell. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned Carolyn Bennett's name, it was just to say she's the most recent politician who's represented
she's
the riding.
Sitting member, yeah.
The former sitting member. Okay, I gotcha. You talk about the act of voting as harm reduction.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
Recognizing that the parties and what they have historically brought to the table, what they propose to bring, there are differences in degree of harm. And so I don't personally think that any government, no matter how much I love their policies, are here for my sovereignty.
So is that a way of saying I'm voting for the least worst option for me?
It kind of, yeah, but not for me also. I think for I align myself with the marginalized, or not align myself, but I think about, those are the people I think about when I vote, as opposed to my own interests and my own things. And so I look at the party's platforms and I think about, who is going to do the least amount of damage to these communities that I care about and I want to be an ally to. And so those are the things I look for in the platforms.
As we look at the demographics at this table, you know whose demographic votes the least, right?
Yeah.
Young people don't vote.
Yeah.
And I've heard campaign managers for years say, we chase them, we chase them, we chase them, we try to put all sorts of policies in there that will appeal to them, and they still don't come out to vote. Do you see any part of your eventually going out to the polls, and you've said you will vote, as a civic duty to do so?
I mean, yes. I mean, I think for Indigenous people, that's also like a much more of a complex question than it is necessarily for non-Indigenous folks. Like, who do I feel a civic duty to? It's not necessarily to the Crown or to Canada to vote in their elections. But I think also to your point about we chase young people, I don't know how true that necessarily is. I think that parties have typically tried to mobilize older demographics of the country who reliably show up to vote. And I think there's always this push for young people to care more about politics, and have historically been a far less of a demand that politics care about young people. And so I think, and this election is an interesting one because the millennial voting bloc is the biggest demographic, and Indigenous young people are the fastest growing population in this country. And so
You could have an impact if you chose to.
Totally. I think so. And I think we're getting to that point now. I think the internet is a huge part to do with it, because we finally have space and voice in these political conversations that we really didn't have access to only a few elections ago. And so I think the turnout of young people in this country and this eagerness to change and the engagement in the issues is greater than ever we've seen before.
Because I kind of struck out with her, asking her who she was going to vote for, I won't ask you who you're going to vote for, but I will ask you, Grand Chief, first, if there's one platform that you've seen so far that resonates more than others.
Not really. NDP, I'm still trying to figure those guys out. And last weekend, I saw an article online where the Greens are now saying through Elizabeth May that they will decriminalize all drugs.
Yes.
And I thought that was an insane thing to say.
How come?
Well, Indigenous people are much higher in drug abuse and early death than most Canadians. And until we see some resources to these First Nations to adapt, even right now, to the cannabis issue, there's always going to be that danger that you're actually going to inadvertently do more harm than help. So I'm not sure exactly. Like I said, I wanted to say, if you want to park your vote somewhere, park it with the Greens. You know, at least do it for the environment. Come out and do it for that. You can figure out the rest later.
You're not so sure about that now, given the drug policy?
I'm not so sure about that one.
Not so sure. Madam President, how about you?
I think you see specific language talking about Indigenous peoples within the NDP and the Green Party, for sure. You see that reflected through some of the commitments that they've made. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't really seen any commitments right now from the Conservative Party when it comes to Indigenous people. And with the Liberal Party, we haven't seen their entire platform yet. But one thing that I will say is that in the last federal election, the Liberal Party made about a dozen Métis Nation-specific commitments. And it was the first time in the history of this country where a federal party has actually made Métis Nation-specific commitments, in addition to the broader First Nations, Métis and broader Métis First Nations and Inuit, like broader umbrella of Indigenous.
What percentage of those commitments do you think they followed through on?
They have been following through on all of those commitments. And so while we haven't seen their entire platform yet, we've actually seen a huge amount of progress with the Liberal Party over the course of the last 4 years when it comes to a commitment to reconciliation with Métis peoples.
So I hear some encouraging comments about them. Is there anybody you've ruled out at this point?
Well, to be honest, I haven't seen anything with regard to the People's Party, and the Bloc Québécois is obviously not of interest to Ontario Métis. Right. But yeah, I think one of the things that we are doing right now is writing to all of the federal parties and asking them specifically to put it on the table, where they stand with regard to the Métis and Métis in particular in Ontario. And we'll be hearing back from them, and we'll be sharing that with our citizens, because that, I think, is the most critical piece, is getting information out to our people so that they can make an informed decision on what it is that they want to see.
And you do expect
government.
To hear back in a timely fashion from them?
I sure hope so.
You hope so?
Yeah.
Grand Chief, is there anybody you've ruled out at this point?
Conservatives right off the bat.
How come?
Well, my experience under Harper was exactly a pleasant one. So
Harper's
no.
not on the ballot this time.
Same, just different labeling. Same can, different labeling. I'm not even going there. Never.
What in particular about the Conservative approach to issues of your concern do you have the biggest problem with?
Well, one was the deep budget cuts that they did to our education and how they were trying to control education while trying to label it as First Nations control of education, which was a pretty nice little mirage there. And then there's the corporate interest, which of course every party's going to do because corporations create jobs. But I think it's time to look at humanity's interest rather than the corporate one. And that's what I'm trying to look for right now, is to see which one will represent that. It's not only for us, we're in it globally with every nation on earth. And I'm sure we'll talk about environment later, which I'm looking forward to.
Okay. You heard Margaret say that in terms of Métis issues that were promised last time, there's been a good deal of follow through from the previous government.
Yeah.
How about as far as you're concerned? For the issues you care about, how much follow through have you seen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to ignore or undermine the significant, the budget allocations that this Liberal government has given towards First Nations issues and governments and projects. Then it's historic, more so than any government in the past. That said, I think that I'm still seeing what a lot of, radical Indigenous folks would call a reconciliation for the colonizer. Reconciliation so long as it's convenient, as long as it doesn't get in the way of things like jobs for oil workers in Alberta. I see that this vision of what reconciliation is for this government, it feels like it's conditional upon their own discretion, which, as Pamela Palmerter would say, it's not reconciliation as so long as it's comfortable. And so I think that we've seen kind of profound failures from this government in terms of really big things that matter to me. I don't want to speak for all young people, matter to a lot of young people, matter to a lot of young Indigenous people, about like the pipeline, about Wet'suwet'en and Unistoten, and we've seen the violence and the imagery there and heard the stories. I think that there have been, Trudeau's greatest opponent in this upcoming election is not necessarily even Andrew Scheer. It's 2015 Justin Trudeau, who promised that he would be this champion of reconciliation, that I think he has let himself down and the rest of us down as well.
Serene Fox was here not too long ago, and she said, I'm tired of hearing of reconciliation. I want to see reconciliation.
Yeah.
Have you seen enough of that?
I don't know that I can necessarily say where the line is. I'll say you're also talking to somebody who my community has been on boil water advisory for 30 years, as well as like still, yeah.
Because I think I got some numbers here, Riley, and I should say, 86 long-term drinking water advisories have been lifted under the Trudeau Liberals since 2015, with a promise for all advisories to be lifted by 2021. Based on the track record, how hopeful are you he'll make good on that? Or he would make good on that if he wins.
Right. I think true, but I think those numbers are also like kind of flatten the situation on the ground for people, because just because the boil water advisory is lifted doesn't necessarily mean that they have sustainable, reliable, clean drinking water on the reserve. I mean, they have to have also these infrastructures. So I know communities who, even though they have like a new water treatment plant, the pipes in the communities are still so old and rusty and all of these things that they can't get the safe water. But there are certain metrics to be considered there. I think, though, that like these basic human rights recognitions are things that we haven't seen in the past. And I think going forward, also, any government needs to be, at very base level, needs to be recognizing when they start rolling out platforms and campaigns.
Grand Chief, let's do what you suggested a moment ago and talk about the environment. Who do you like on the environment?
Well, for the moment, I know that Trudeau and his government, they really failed with that purchase of the Trans Mountain pipeline. But I think giving a chance to the Greens and see what they could do, as long as they backtrack on that legalization of all drugs. Could you imagine fentanyl being legalized? I don't. But anyways, the environment, when we look at it, First Nations are always the first ones to feel the brunt of that. Many of them are still living off the lands in the northern areas, and you're starting to look at species here in Canada. Apparently one estimate was done, and 50% of all wildlife in this country will be endangered in less than 100 years. Bird species are dying off. Your water tables are collapsing in some areas. So you're going to see a huge impact within the next 20 years, not 100, in the next 20 years. That's why you're seeing big mobilizations like the one in Montreal coming up here of 300,000 people, and another one possibly in Ottawa, almost the same size. So people are mobilizing and starting to tell the governments, no more corporate interests, start looking at humanity's interests when it comes to the future. The way they're going right now, oil has served its purpose. It's time to educate. It's time to reinvest. Maybe go to the best physicists in this country, the best engineers, the best mathematicians here to figure out a way. How do you take this fossil fuel away? It's like almost like trying to dissect a tumor off a brain. You can't do it in one shot. You got to be very careful, or you kill the patient. Oil is the same way. It's so infused in the economy and in our lives that you're going to have to be careful. But you got to start somewhere. Make the first cut somewhere and start moving ahead and remove that tumor from our lives. Now, if they don't do it, buying pipelines at $4.5 billion is ridiculous. That's going in the wrong direction.
Madam President, on the environment, who do you like?
Environment's a huge issue for Métis people, and similar to what the Grand Chief has said, Métis live very close to the land, and so we are seeing the effects right now. And and we're not in a time where we can ignore this. I think this is fundamentally one of the most critical issues. When we hear from the United Nations that 100 of the world's top scientists are saying we are about to reach a point where we will do irreparable harm to this planet, it's something that we can't ignore. I'm really troubled by how the conversation around putting a price on carbon has gone in this country. And in fact, I was just listening to an TVO on Poly webcast about this the other day and thinking about how it has really become a political issue as opposed to what it had looked like initially, which was all parties coming together to say, this just makes sense.
There was a growing consensus at some point.
Exactly.
But then Doug Ford came in, Jason Kenney came in, Scott Moe came in. The consensus is disappearing.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense that we wouldn't actually price pollution. So in that sense, I think certainly I don't see that price on pollution in the Conservative platform.
Well, they're taking a different approach. They're taking a regulatory approach as opposed to a price on carbon approach.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for you?
Well, I just don't see how that's going to end up showing real results in the end. And ultimately, this is, people talk about the impact that it's going to have within our families and our communities, but this is an issue that we all wear, that we all are responsible for.
Yeah.
Riley?
Yeah, the environment for me is probably the thing, and the policies that the parties propose around the environment are the things I'm looking at most at this next election.
Who do you like so
far? I mean, none of them are super awesome, I'll say. I have been looking a lot, actually, at the NDP's platform, and they are saying some good stuff. But again, it is early, and the whole campaign of the parties aren't out yet. But I think what I'm most disappointed about in terms of federally the climate conversation in Canada is that we get so stuck talking about, the carbon tax and the environment and the economy going hand in hand, and there are some really deeply entrenched issues or inextricably linked issues about climate change that we have to talk about that I don't think anybody has really started to engage in, and one of them being Indigenous sovereignty, about just transitions, migrant and racial justice also being a huge one with the migrant crisis that we're going to be seeing that's already started and that's only going to get worse as climate change worsens. And so these are things that I'm also looking for that no party has super really touched on yet, and I think in an effective way at all. So those are the big ones.
Let me stop you there because we've got a few minutes left here, and I want to touch on a couple of more things. Grand Chief, to you first on this. Jody Wilson-Raybould's coming on this program right after our conversation here. I had the pleasure of interviewing her yesterday at Harbourfront in the Word on the Street Book Festival. And I didn't ask her this then, so I'm going to ask you now. Here's what the Conservative Party tweeted on the 17th of September. A year ago today, September 17th, Justin Trudeau met with Jody Wilson-Raybould for the first time and pressured her to stop SNC-Lavalin's criminal prosecution, citing the outcome of the Quebec election and his own status as the MP for Papineau, and the hashtag SNC1Year. I'd like to know whether you have any issue with one political party using for their campaign purposes an Indigenous woman.
Well, I'm just, what pops into mind right off the bat is if the Conservatives would have handled it any differently. They're not looking at it as a principle of any sort, I'm sure. It's more, you look at, there's 9,000 jobs that were at stake. And it was either 9,000 jobs or go through with the details of legal action. So Lavalin was going to pay a huge fine. And Jody, I think it was a matter of judgment, I think, on her part. And I think both sides were right in this argument. You have 9,000 jobs in the balance, and yet something has to be done with this corporation, because you can't have corporations running loose like that.
But you're getting into the nuts and bolts of the case, and I don't want to do that. I want to get into the advisability of using, it's interesting that Indigenous woman has become, in some respects, a very big part of the election campaign.
Yes.
What do you think of that?
I think it was right for her to be in that position to begin with. It was long overdue. And to use her in this campaign, I think is just a diversion again from from their own, how would I say, their own little black book, from the Conservatives and what they've done in the past with their corporate friends. So they're diverting the attention away from what we should be talking about.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left here, and I obviously have to ask about this. The Trudeau blackface, brownface controversy.
Oof.
Your view.
Thanks for going to me first on that one, Steve. I just want to start by saying that, I think it goes without saying in this country that blackface, brown face, putting that on, espousing that is wrong, and it's racist, and that I think is unequivocal.
Do you think he's a racist?
I don't, actually, because I think, and I believe, and I have to believe, in people's ability to learn and grow and change. And so what I will say, and I mentioned this to Riley when we were waiting to come onto the program today, I think it's a great opportunity for us to have some real honest conversations about the history of racism in this country.
We're doing that right now.
I don't think that's really what's happening generally within the media. But I will say I believe in people's ability to change and grow. And what I look to, and I think what many people look to, is actually their actions and what it is that they do. And so from my perspective, we just, 2 weeks ago, we just had the opportunity to have a formal apology from the Government of Canada to Métis World War II veterans, and a commitment of $30 million towards compensating those veterans and their families and establishing a trust to support those. And we've seen over the course of the last 4 years, it is literally night and day for Métis in this country. We have gone from being completely ignored and irrelevant, not acknowledged in any way, over the course of just the last 4 years, to recently signing a self-government agreement, recognizing our inherent right of self-determination and setting a path forward to achieve full self-government for Métis in Ontario.
Your view of the Trudeau situation?
My view, I think the only thing the Prime Minister was guilty of was youthful bad taste. That's what he was guilty of. I don't believe he's a racist, as you don't. And I think in today's day and age, I think you have to be a little bit more sensitive about the world around you and the people who live with you.
Is it youthful bad taste when you're 29 years old?
I think you're still within that. I think that border between you should know better and still you're still a kid. But yeah.
Okay, Riley, your take.
I will say that I have a really hard time just saying also, too, that this was, a mistake. And as much as I believe in people growing and changing, I don't know about how I feel about this in Trudeau's case. But I will say I agree with Margaret in that I think this is important and it's an important moment to talk about race in this country and to talk about how this election has always been about race. Is particularly, there's a great National Post piece about it and about how Jagmeet Singh plays into all of this. But I think also I'm wary to really talk too much about this, other than to say that I think that this is a conversation that Black and Brown folks need to be having in this country, and they need to have the forthright voice for, and that I'm mostly here just to listen to what they have to say about it and support them going forward in this election.
Gotcha. Good of all of you to come into TVO tonight and help us out with this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
And good luck on Election Day with whatever you decide to do or not to do.
Absolutely. And get out and vote.
Yeah.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.